Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Executive Scrutiny Board on the 11th of May 2026. Welcome. We'll go straight into the agenda. I don't think we have any apologies that we've got a full raft tonight.
I think,
oh, sorry, we're missing one.
I've just received Chair, apologies from Councillor Eyre.
I do apologise. He sits at the back and I didn't see him there. Okay, any late items? There aren't any. Declarations of interest? No? Okay. Minutes as published in item 4. Are there any comments? Are we going to note those, agree them? Okay, yep. Item 5 is the forward plan. That's a long-standing item. If you look at the changes since the last forward plan page, it's in our gift, obviously, to look at that list, and if you feel that there's anything that needs to be brought to this board for more in-depth scrutiny, including inviting the Cabinet member, we can do so. I noticed that further update on Darley Abbey Mills Bridge is in there, but obviously that's being dealt with as we go along, and there's an item in the Cabinet which we'll briefly discuss on that. If there's no suggestions on that particular list, Councillor Kerr?
It's actually just this point that we've made before about timing, in that we've got 2 of the new items added since our last copy of this. We're actually going to this committee, so if one of the scrutiny boards wish to consider those, it would make it very difficult for them. And in the case of the sale of land off Prince Charles Avenue, I would have thought that, yes, there was going to be more consultation on that. But they might have been able to give a bit more notice.
I don't suppose... Emily, I was just going to ask, what's the pathway for that? Has it gone to ONS? You know, can we answer Councillor Kerr's query, please?
It has actually come around quite quickly, so unfortunately there wasn't an opportunity to give advance notice. Whilst there have been discussions, they've not had any purpose or clarity of sufficient detail to allow us to bring it. This is the first opportunity we've had to bring it and to put it on the forward plan. Okay.
I mean, we are going to scrutinise it to a degree, I suppose, but I take your point, Councillor Kerr. Would this have, Emily, sorry to ask you again and bring you in, but would this have qualified for a Cabinet member meeting? Or, I mean, it seems to have come from, you know, a standing start to here. So, you know, why the quick timing? Why haven't we had a few weeks at least?
Because well, it'll all come through in the discussion of the report, but essentially the ICB and their partner have indicated that in order to progress to negotiation, they need certainty of disposal of the land by the council in terms of the declaring of that land surplus, and that is something that can only be done by Cabinet.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr.
The question is really, when did the ICB start discussions with the council about finding a possible site in the Mackworth area? Because it would have been at that point that a heading that might have been sale of land in the Mackworth area might have gone on the forward plan. And therefore, it could have been raised at that point. Knowing the specifics of which land it is probably less important than to know it's being discussed. From the point of view of the forward plan.
I mean, I would have expected it to go to, is it the Health and Wellbeing Board that would have ICB, or whichever relevant one it is, that they have ICB occasional attendance and reports from. So I suppose that's the point we're trying to feed back, Emily, is that it should have really had more scrutiny, I believe.
I think the issue of primary care provision in Mackworth has been a subject of many discussions across numerous forums for a number of years. It's been a problem for a very long time and therefore has been discussed at various boards and committees. This is just the technical step of declaration of surplus. And in response to Councillor Kerr's query, the forward plan requires us to put sufficient information on the forward plan to give some kind of detail of what is being discussed. So sale of land at Mackworth would have been of no use to the public in determining what the decision to be made was. So whilst I take the point, and we do try to put things on the forward plan as soon as possible, on this occasion there wasn't an earlier opportunity.
It's actually a fair point, to be honest. Obviously, the health provision, medical centres, GPs, etc., it will have been covered, so that is fair to say. So I'll probably, roll back a little bit on that, because it's not going to come from nowhere. obviously.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, we'll move on. Okay, so item 6 then is the overview and scrutiny forward plan. Obviously, we're moving, as we said last meeting, into the AGM. It's good to see the work programme for the year, and everyone's worked really hard, and I think there's been some good outcomes based on the conversation that I've had with some of the chairs. And on that, whoever leads this or chairs this board moving forward after the AGM, I hope they have a really productive set of meetings with the other overview and scrutiny chairs and vice chairs. I found it incredibly useful to have an open and honest discussion with them. I think we've come up with lots of positive suggestions of a way forward to improve overview and scrutiny, and mostly in a well, I'd say in my view, entirely in a non-political way, to actually try and get the outcomes we can for the council and to support the work programme. So I want to see that continue, and hopefully in the new municipal year, the first couple of meetings of this board, it could be that we could put forward some suggestions for the various overview and scrutiny boards to consider work programmes or items that we want to send their way. But at the moment, obviously, we're heading towards the end of the municipal year, so I don't think it'd be fair to send them their way, because I don't think there are any more meetings in terms of ONS. Okay, item 7, recommendations. They were all noted this time, so not rejected, but noted. There's a debate as to whether that's a different thing, but anyway, they're noted and are in the item set. If you want 7, if you want to actually see what they were, if you can't recall what we sent to the cabinet last time. So we'll move on now to item 8, which is the cabinet agenda, council cabinet agenda. Our first consideration is item 8, which is the minute extract from Executive Scrutiny Board on the 7th of April. Now, this is really important for us. You'll notice the recommendations in regards to send provision and planning and all those other issues that we scrutinised and discussed in great detail on the 7th of April, and it's actually heading towards Cabinet this week, so it will in due course come back to this board as well for further discussion, and that's something which obviously we're very keen to do. So that's good to see that's moving forward. And key decisions then, so if we move to item 9, which is authorisation to bid and accept Homes England grant funding. Who's gonna, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report seeks to authorise Derby City Council and Derby Homes Limited to enter into a consortium to bid to Homes England as a qualified investment partner for grant funding under the new Social and Affordable Homes programme. We are recommending to approve in principle the submission of a series of bids and to also seeking the necessary delegations to agree and submit each bid, and to enter into all agreements necessary to accept the grant funding, subject to suitable terms and conditions. Also for Derby City Council to act as the accountable body, which is the lead partner of the consortium. If Derby Homes did submit any grant, we would then transfer the capital grant to them. Subject to a successful award from Homes England and the approval of the HRA Capital Board to approve the addition of the project and the capital grant to the HRA Capital Programme. The grant will be used to help deliver social and affordable housing throughout the city. We will also obviously ensure compliance with all contract and financial procedures. The new SAHP funding replaces the previous grant funding and is a 10-year programme with available funding of 27.3 billion, excluding London. Within the SAHP, we undertake continuous market engagement, which is CME, and that means we can apply for grant as we have a project that would be relevant and suitable to meet the terms and requirements. Although it's primarily available for new build affordable housing, there are plenty of other funding that we can use it for. So in order to apply and receive the grant funding, we do need to be an investment partner. And that means we have to enter into an agreement with them. We have previously done that as a consortium with Derby Homes. The benefit of that is that Derby Homes have successfully received grant to provide affordable homes that we as DCC are unable to provide, such as properties for care leavers under 18s, where we would still be the responsible parent. From 1st of April, we are now able to use grant actively alongside our right to buy receipts. So previously, our programme was predominantly right to buy receipts, along with council borrowing. Now we're able to combine them. It does offer us a much greater degree of flexibility. It means we can apply for varying amounts of grant and actually reduce the amount of our right to buy receipts that we're allocating to a project, and allows us to maximise the number of projects that we can use those right to buy receipts against. We have said that we will review the expiry of this delegation because we're only seeking it for 3 years. And the reason for that is that we need the flexibility because we don't know whether the programme will actually vary over the full 10 years. As we are delivering new homes, there are all the positive benefits of those new homes, and it does allow us to maximise the opportunities for new affordable homes within Derby. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll open this up. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Karen, for clarifying the period for this, because the recommendation as written, 2.2, doesn't stipulate a period, and that was going to be one of my questions, because it sort of alludes to it being to be assessed later and only 3 years later on in the paper. So I think there might need to be a tweaking of the wording in 2.2, Chair. I also had a question about the stakeholder engagement for, it says ward councillors will be briefed, this is paragraph 5.2. Ward councillors will be briefed on each new project that falls within their ward at the appropriate points within the project life cycle. And I thought it'd be useful for members to know what the appropriate points are so that they can be satisfied that they are the appropriate points. And I also got a question, just an observation that in 6.1, when we're talking about the right to buy receipts, there probably will be fewer receipts, but hopefully they'll be higher. Is that true? And in point 9.5, when we're looking at the climate change implications, it talks about business positive, so because the affordable housing projects could contribute to economic growth through the use of local subcontractors and labour. But why is that business positive green beneficial for climate? It's beneficial for the economic situation in Derby and for jobs, but why is it better for climate? Sorry, it's rather a lot of questions.
I need to just remind me of them as I go through. I think if I take the 6.1, the right to buy receipts. So now there is a cap on the amount of discount. So there will be more coming in, but we're already seeing a drop in the number of right to buy applications that we are receiving. So although there will be slightly more coming in from each property, there's a substantially lower number of coming through. So the HRA business plan has actually modelled for that. So with regards to the business positive, yes, we do, and we did actually seek some advice from the climate change team on this, and they were saying that it was a business positive with regards to the generation of the economic growth. So I can actually raise that with those
Lovely,
on that one.
thank you.
Sorry, what was the other one?
That was the earlier one. Oh, the appropriate point for member consultation.
Okay, thank you. So what we normally do is we will consult before we go almost like public with the project. It depends on the size of the project that we're doing, but we obviously keep our cabinet member informed of all projects that are in the pipeline. We then generally wait until we've got surety of the project before we go to the ward members, and then at each time that we are contacting any of the local residents in regard to any of the projects, we always make sure that we contact ward members just before, so with copies of any letters or general information that we are sending out.
Thank you.
2.2, you mentioned Councillor Kerr before we move on to Councillor
Yes.
Rawson. What specific wording were you concerned about?
Because it's been explained that the request is for delegation for the authority for a period of 3 years initially, and then to review whether it's working and to extend it up to potentially 10 later. But this just delegates authority with an unspecified length of time. So I'd have expected to say to delegate authority to the Strategic Directorate Place in consultation with the Director of Finance and Section 151 officer and the Cabinet Member for Housing, blah, 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 for a period of 3 years.
We have actually put in 2.1 for an initial time period of 3 years.
That's for the submission of bids, not for the delegation.
So you recommending that the delegation ties through with the initial
That's what
period?
I understood that you were explaining to us that it would be, and that's why it says we will review the efficiency of the delegation in 4.12 and seek further approval if appropriate, which implies that the initial approval was for a shorter period of time. And that's why I concluded that it should be there in 2.2.
I mean, I'm happy for you to just, if you draw up a, I mean, it's not for me, it's for you, but if you want to draw up a very simple recommendation,
Okay.
Councillor Kerr, then we'll put it out there. I'm happy to second that if we put it out there.
I'll do
Maybe
that.
just spend a little time doing that, and then we'll come back to it and get it put to the board. Councillor Rawson.
So, thank you, Chair. Yeah, 2 questions, if I could. It's obviously always great to get extra government funding, so that's very much to be welcomed. One of the issues that we have, though, is a lack of land to actually build new social housing on. So does this funding allow us to purchase land potentially from private individuals to enable us to increase the land that we've got available? And secondly, just to clear up whether 4.4, it says it's primarily available for the supply of new build affordable housing, but then one of the bullet points says repurposing empty homes. So is it possible to use this funding to purchase existing homes off the open market, or is it primarily for new build? If we could just get a bit of clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of queries, but if you can answer Councillor Rawson's questions, because I've got specific 2 questions that key into those 2 queries.
Okay, so with regards to land purchase, that would be part of any development costs. And we would have to factor that into all of our financial appraisals, and then we would use that to indicate what level of grant we were looking to apply for. So it's not specifically there for land purchase, but if it is part of the overarching project costs, then the land purchase price is actually taken into consideration as part of that appraisal process. With regards to the SAHP and repurposing empty homes, what they have previously done is mini sub-rounds where they have done some specifically targeting empty homes, and we have previously been successful in doing that, although that was some time ago. Generally, with regards to that, we find that we don't really need that much in the way of grant to be able to actually deliver those for it to be viable. But all of these items are within the SAHP programme, and it is all things that we can look at, and we would then be looking at submitting a grant. So we could potentially look at a programme of 10 or 15 empty homes, and we would have to indicate costs, submit a grant bid, and then Homes England would tell us whether we were successful with that.
Thank you. So just on the second point first then, when we talk about empty homes, I suppose there's homes that have been empty for a significant amount of time that would be obviously very useful to bring back into use, that the council already has various mechanisms to try and look to see whether we can move that along and purchase ourselves, etc. But on that, does that include homes on the market, private market, if you like? Would this funding, on occasion, potentially be able to be used to purchase a property from the open market, the private market, if it was suitable for a particular use? Because I know the council has done that in the past. So I suppose it can be an empty home in some cases if the owners have sadly passed away, and maybe that's the circumstance. But other houses in the general in the general market, would they ever consider that?
It would be considered. As I say, we would normally do it as a programme because of the work involved in actually submitting the bid and for that bid to be taken, and Homes England prefer something with a bit more of a bulk, which is why I say if we were to say that we would look at a programme of targeting 10 properties, purchasing off the open market, and then bringing them back into use, and we would be focusing on vacant properties. Again, like I say, if we factor it in, put the bid in, and they would then turn around and look at it, but they would not look at it on a property by property basis. It would need to be part of a bigger package.
Okay, and then on the first point, and I know that the council has done this, not necessarily with this particular kind of funding, but example, Councillor Rawson mentioned potentially working with a plot or purchase of, well, let me give you an example, a development in wherever. Would the council be able to use this funding to say to the developer, we would like to purchase either the plot, or we would like to purchase 15 homes in this area here that are going to be specifically, for example, specialist or supporting houses for older people or disabled, those with mobility issues? Would this funding be able to fund that within a new development?
It would depend on the size of the development. So if it was a Section 106 site, this could not be used to contribute towards the Section 106 affordable housing. It can be used on any new build site for something that's they class as additionality, so that's anything over and above the Section 106 that's being delivered. But yes, it can be used to enter into development agreements with the developer to purchase on a larger site, or even purchase a whole site.
I've seen that done, and it really can deliver much needed provision as well. So, and I do accept that it's above and beyond what a developer has agreed via the planning process. But so that's good news.
The one caveat I would say is that there is a design criteria that the properties need to meet. So they would need to meet, so it's things like they would have to meet the National Design Space Standards. There's also building for a healthy life. So those are criteria that we would need to make sure that the property's met. But if they meet that, then yes, it is something we could look at.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Kerr, oh sorry, are there any other questions, queries? No? Councillor Kerr, do you have that recommendation for the wording change on 2.2?
I have a very short recommendation to ask Cabinet to add to paragraph 2.2 the time frame for the delegation, 3 years, to match those given for bidding in 2.1 and referenced in 4.12.
That's a proposal. I'll second that. Are we all agreed? Anyone? Everyone? Okay. No one against? Okay. Thank you. If you could just email that through, that'd be great. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Probably already has. Okay. What we got? Let's have a look. Okay. Item 10, which is end-to-end fostering hubs design phase approval. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval to proceed with the DFE's design phase of the end-to-end fostering hubs programme and building on our existing fostering hub that we've had for the last 2 years. So this will bring together, through additional central government funding, the recruitment, assessment, panel and approval processes for foster carers across Derbyshire, Derby, Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. So why is this needed? That's set out in section 3. There is a national and local shortage of foster carers. This development will strengthen both Derby City Councils and D2N2 as a region initiative to create the 10,000 additional foster carers and placements needed by 2029. It'll also reduce the reliance on high-cost residential placements. 4.2 sets out the core objectives of a regional centralised hub, which essentially is the pooling of resources, expertise and marketing across D2N2, the expansion of that single front door currently used for inquiries and recruitment, to expand that to assessment and approvals. This will provide stronger support and training for our existing foster carers across the region. It will also enable us to develop a regional performance framework for recruitment and retention of placement outcomes. And this will also align with pending Regional Care Cooperative RCC's long-term planning. The benefits are outlined in 4.3, which is increased foster carers and placements, that improved retention, enhanced placement stability, and those standardised processes and sharing best practice across the region. Will strengthen our existing partnership working with third sector organisations and independent fostering agencies. And overall, these will result in better outcomes for our children in care. 4.4 outlines the design phase timescale, which is from June with a go-live date, very tight timescales for September. And 4.5 to 4.8 outlines the prospective governance arrangements, which will be through a head of service overseen by Fostering Governance Board to carry out statutory duties on behalf of the 4 local authorities and to operate a rota system for agency decision makers for foster care approval. Financial implications are fully funded for this year, and finally, LGR implications should not change the end-to-end delivery. In fact, it rationalises processes and sets up a single practice across Derbyshire. So key assurances for members: Derby City Council remains the lead authority for fostering for East Midlands. It retains oversight for delegated panel and agency decision making and will ensure robust governance, data protection and safeguarding standards via updated collaboration agreements. And decisions and the recommendations being asked to approve are 2.1 to 2.5. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. An interesting report, and obviously as a previous Cabinet Member for Children and Young People and Safeguarding, I've got a keen interest in this topic. My concern is, well, thank you to Sue-Ann for introducing the report. Page 4, the top 4.4. I'm a bit concerned about and in fact Suzanne said herself, the tight time scale. What happens if we don't meet that? And my second point is under public stakeholder engagement. I think that's really, really important that we do talk to the foster carers and we have their take on the design phase, as it says, and obviously listen very carefully to their views. I'm reassured by that. But can Sue-Ann perhaps ensure and perhaps clarify to us that it will be meaningful consultation and their views will be taken into account? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Yes, it is tight timescale. We're already an existing fostering hub, so therefore we are absolutely hitting the ground running in terms of being able to mobilise those discussions. We are in constant discussions with the 4 local authorities, and there is agreement to move forward on these plans. So there is no impediment in terms of us being all wanting to achieve the same aim. Again, with foster carers, we are already having workshops, and we have been having workshops and had throughout the last 2 years, but primarily in the run-up to the end-to-end process. So foster carers have been fully consulted and been part of this. There's also been a national consultation which our foster carers have been part of, and there again is full support for this process, and from our region and from the rest of the D2N2 region. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to go back to Councillor Bolton's very valid point about 4.4, which is the time frame. So I suppose there's 2 further questions on that, just to clarify. What's the specific reason for this very ambitious or tight timeline? And also, are there any implications in terms of funding or any concerns that we should have as a board if this time frame isn't met?
So the timescales were set out by DFE, and we have been working towards those. We don't anticipate that there are any issues. Everybody is lined up in terms of their cabinet approvals across the 4 local authorities. There is additional funding to support with the implementation of this, and this year is absolutely fully funded to deliver.
So I get that, and it's good that we've got a good, ambitious time frame, but there isn't any risk. I'm trying to probably ask you about the risk of not meeting this time frame. Would it mean that we lose funding, or we have some kind of censure in some other way?
The plan has been timetabled to be delivered by September, and we are on track. We have a monthly governance board that tracks all of the actions needed. That is on track. There's no reason for us to indicate that we would not meet what we're intended to meet. The risk is low. Thank you.
Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd say, I mean, anything that increase the level of fostering in the county and broader is to be welcomed. My frustration with this is, though, that in terms of scrutiny, it gives us very little information on which to scrutinise. There's a set of, I think it's in page 2, talks about Nottingham County Council have established processes, professional expertise, statutory oversight, a lot of processes, but no evaluation whether they actually work any better than any other option. So, you know, in terms of scrutiny, it gives us very little to go on apart from getting the money from central government, and it's £50,000, I understand, between the 4 authorities. So it's not a significant amount. I think one of my questions was on local government reorganisation. I think you've answered that. But my fundamental concern is this going to take us any further forward to meeting that national target of 10,000? Because there's no performance measures, and I do note the fact that it's intended to set a regional performance framework, but that's rather after the horse has bolted, really, once we've invested all this money on it. I've also got a question in terms of the allocation of funding as well, that we seem to be, in terms of ongoing revenue funding, we've got the highest amount. And last time I checked in terms of population, there's at least 2 other authorities there of greater population. I imagine fostering to some extent, not totally, is a function of a population and deprivation and issues like that. And there's no justification from that other than these are the one. But I think my overall frustration is we've got 14 working days before you've got to submit this thing, and you're asking us to scrutinise this. And I imagine that 95% of the work has already been done because you've got a deadline of the 1st of June to submit this. And, you know, I think, Chair, this is something, in my view, for future meetings, is that if we are going to properly scrutinise these things, and this may have already gone to Children's Young Person and Skills Board, and if that's the case, then, you know, a lot of my comments will probably been scrutinised at that board level, which is probably the most appropriate first scrutiny, although I do recognise this is going to cabinet this week. And that's where my frustration is that, you know, we're being asked to scrutinise a very important policy for the council going forward, when it appears to me that all the key decisions will probably have already been made already and very little chance to actually alter them.
Sorry, can we just pause a second? I was just checking that it's streaming. It doesn't seem to be streaming on YouTube, but we'll continue. But that's why I'm slightly distracted. Apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. I suppose the request from the DFE was being formulated at the beginning of April, so we've had a very short turnaround time for us to be putting forward our plans. So there was some consultation earlier on in the year and then a request for us to put forward these plans. So this is the earliest we could put a report in front of yourselves to outline what the request is. With regards to the budgeting, I appreciate that we're all around the similar amount for our fostering services, and I suppose this was more about what each local authority were bringing to the table. So it's not about the harmonisation. This was what existing services were investing, and that's what they're continuing to invest. Sorry, I can't remember what else you said.
Yeah, I mean, my key point really is this going to make any difference?
Yes. So I have got some stats here, which I think will be of interest. So the reason why we embarked on a fostering hub, and these numbers may seem small, but in our respective 4 authorities, in 2022, we only approved 36 foster carers between the 4 local authorities. It's because we were competing against each other. And then in 2023, before we became the panel, before we became the hub, there was only 46. From 2024, we're seeing a gradual increase. So in the first year, we had 66. We recruited 56 and approved 66. And then in 2025, it was 75. So we can see that we are building, and together we are stronger than we're apart. So in terms of the 10,000, which seems very ambitious, that's nationally over 3 years. That equates to about 20 per local authority per year. And if we're achieving 75 and increasing, then we would need to have about 20 each. So I think that is a reasonable amount of placements and carers that the government are asking us to achieve, and we're nearly there at the beginning of the end of the second year. As we move towards bringing assessments and panel processes in, that again allows us more efficiency to be in control of the timescales and move things quicker rather than to go out to the other local authorities.
Yeah, and I suppose my point is it would have been very helpful if that sort of information would demonstrate they're actually investing wisely. The justification, I think, is a very laudable objective, but, you know, we've got to make sure we're actually delivering taxpayers' money effectively. So, you know, having that sort of performance data in these sorts of reports, I think, would give a lot of reassurance that we are investing appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Amin first, and then Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. On the report of 3.1, it mentioned about national shortage. I just want to be curious, want to know what is the actual total number of carers that we have in Derby?
So we have approximately 130 carers in Derby, with more placements because some carers will have 2 or 3 bedrooms. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, and thanks. I think it's been a really useful discussion following on from the report. One of my questions had been, do we know that the other authorities have got this going through their cabinet process, for example? I'm surprised that the design phase was timed from February if we weren't even told about this until April. But hey, it's quite challenging, isn't it? There's a reference to something called Mockingbird in paragraph 7.1, and I've no idea what Mockingbird is, which would be useful to know. I think that in terms of the climate implications, going to a regional hub, it says may reduce unnecessary travel. But I'm thinking that if everybody's going to one hub, then for quite a lot of people it may be additional travel because it's no longer particularly local. It's going to be to the place within the 2 counties. So I thought that was a little optimistic. But generally, I think it almost feels as though the government has looked to see what's happening in our area. It has seen those statistics and says, yes, we ought to be working as hubs rather than individually and competing with each other. Though looking at 2022, I think there might have still been COVID-type implications coming out at that time and reluctance for sort of extending one's household. But we've still got this hub, presumably competing a bit with the Leicestershire hub or with the South Yorkshire hub or whatever. So I was wondering how much our numbers are actually likely to increase and what are we doing to avoid competition with the other boundaries across the area?
It's a good question. Thank you, Councillor Kerr. So just in terms of Mockingbird, first of all, Mockingbird is the support for foster carers. So we recruit a hub carer who has a constellation of about 6 carers that they support, and between that group of 6 carers and all of those children, they provide respite, support, care, etc. And that's to stop breakdown of placements. That has proved exceptionally successful. So we have 2 Mockingbird constellations in Derby, and each of the 4 local authorities have those support groups. We haven't had a breakdown of placement since those hubs were in place because they wrap themselves round the child like a community and a family, and where a carer is struggling, then another carer will step in. It's exceptionally successful, and we've found that is we want to grow that model, and we do it across D2N2. Thank you. The competition. Well, I suppose in terms of we are getting more independent, so the private foster carers transferring now into the local authority. So a number of those new carers are independent foster carers transferring in. Our branding and our presence now across D2N2 means that we are the single, that we're the highest agency, fostering agency in the region now, which is significant. In terms of we're not seemingly losing anybody to the north east or to the north, and the south of East Midlands haven't yet developed a fostering hub. They are still working as independent local authorities. However, under the Regional Care Cooperative, we will have a dotted line, and we will be making sure that there is an interrelationship and an agreement around where people choose to apply or where they want to foster, etc. So there will be a conversation and a relationship with neighbouring authorities. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr?
It sounds to me, Chair, that friendly relationship with nearby hubs is going to be a really important development. Is it something that the government has stipulated, or is it something that we need to be mindful of?
The government haven't stipulated. They've stipulated that all areas must form hubs. That's mandatory. So that will be happening over the next year or so. I think it's within it's our prerogative really, and it's incumbent upon us to be reaching out and developing those strong relationships so that we can agree recruitment. Yes, yeah, I think it would be the best way to do that. Thank you.
It's really good news actually to hear that there's movement from private to local authority. That's really, really good to hear. Councillor Cecile Wright, thank you for your patience.
Yes, I was going to ask a question about the competition, the extent to which the private sector is inadvertently rigging the market. But I think one can assure that if there is a transfer out of the private into the council provision, that can only be positive. In relation to carers, do you have a plan of action strategy for increasing the number of carers that there are available? Thank you.
The regional recruitment hub is all around making sure that our presence is the largest presence in the region. We are the largest fostering agency now within Derby, Derbyshire, Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. We have a huge programme of marketing and recruitment, and word of mouth is still very strong in terms of attracting new carers. As I've just outlined, together we've probably doubled in the last 2 years the collective recruitment of carers, which is a good start, and we know that there needs to be more, and we need to be a lot more ambitious. But I think we can see that this is paying dividends for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr.
Can I ask if people would support a recommendation just encouraging that reaching out to other hubs once they form in September to develop that working relationship?
If you have a wording.
I can develop a wording.
Yeah, we can come back to that and you can put it forward to the board. Do you mind if we move on in the meantime? We can just return to that. Any more questions, queries, comments? Thank you. I think we can resolve to welcome the report as a board. Seconded and agreed that? Okay, thank you. Okay, we will come back to you, Councillor Kerr. Well, remind me if we don't. Okay, I'm sure, yeah. Item 11, Pride in Place programme, New Normanton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report for the Pride in Place programme funding for New Normanton. This is a long-term investment of up to £20 million over 2 years awarded to New Normanton. The funding is split between revenue and capital and is intended to support lasting change. So 63% of the funding is capital, 37% is revenue. The programme is explicitly community-led. The local Pride in Place board will be established and chaired independently, including the local MP and at least one ward councillor and community representatives. The board will work in partnership with the council to develop an investment plan which will cover the initial 3 to 4 years. This needs to reflect local priorities and deliver the programme's core objectives, which are around building stronger communities, creating thriving places and empowering people to shape their futures. Derby City Council will act as the accountable body, taking initial responsibility for governance, financial management and ensuring that the public money is used appropriately and in line with grant conditions. The costs of the programme management and delivery are funded from the grant and no match funding is required. The report seeks approval for 4 items. Firstly, to obtain approval and delegated authority to accept the £20 million of Pride in Place programme funding for New Normanton, subject to satisfactory grant conditions. This authority will sit with the Strategic Director of Place in consultation with the Section 151 officer and the Cabinet Member for Communities, Equalities and Public Safety, and would support the investment over a 10-year period. The second point is to confirm that Derby City Council will act as the accountable body with responsibility for governance, financial oversight and compliance with the grant conditions. The third asks to delegate authority to the Section 151 officer to make the necessary amendments to the Council's capital programme to enable delivery of schemes funded through the Pride in Place programme. The fourth and final one asks that the delegate authority to the Strategic Director of Place in consultation with the Section 151 officer and the relevant Cabinet Member to submit the investment plan to the Government, establish the required governance arrangements, deploy the funding and enter into any associated funding or delivery arrangements needed to implement the programme. Just with regard to timelines, Chair, the advert for the chair for the New Normanton board is closed and that will be interviewed in the start of June. August 2026, we will need to confirm the creation and composition of the board to MHCLG, and then in January 2027, the investment plan for the first 3 to 4 years will need to be submitted to MHCLG. You may remember the Charleston West report coming here a couple of months ago. So the New Normanton proposal mirrors Chad West, but is kind of 3 months behind in terms of its timelines. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, first off the bat, I suppose for such a significant report and investment in an area of Derby, you know, obviously we haven't got that much detail. I understand why, because obviously this is the first steps of building the board. And, I suppose, is the council going to use Charleston West as the framework for this? Well, are there going to be slight differences because they're different areas of Derby? How do we ensure that there's the consultation with the residents of the area are fully taken on board to ensure that residents and community groups and charities, etc., have a real say in this moving forward? Because Charleston West is slightly ahead of this, you know, are the things that are going to be in parallel or lessons learned from that process?
We're certainly, it feels a bit like Wallace and Gromit building the train track, but we are learning the lessons from Charleston West. The first, certainly up until August, well, at the point at which we recruit the board, so there's some work going on already around consultation. So the MP's office has already sent a questionnaire out to the residents of the particular geographies, both Charleston West and New Normanton. From the point at which the board is established, there is a significant period of consultation with funding allocated to do that across both residents and the relevant community groups. And you're right, it is very different in terms of makeup, both in terms of population, but also those organisations that service those two areas.
Thank you. Councillor Cecile Wright.
Thank you very much for the report. Does this configuration supersede ward boundaries? Because I'm just asking as a councillor that has Normanton in my ward, what happens to the old Normanton? And these part, yeah, I've got it here. Yeah. So
Say the wards.
Well, yeah, I'm just do the ward rather, because much of this is situated within Arboretum ward. So I'm just, as a ward councillor, I'm just trying to get some sort of understanding of the concept behind this.
So just before you answer
Thank
that,
you.
so just for what we're looking at here, obviously that those at home can look at it online, but we have a very specific footprint of New Normanton, which doesn't follow obviously a ward boundary pattern. So I suppose the logic, what is the reason behind this, where you have very, very distinct lines around an area that, without actually double checking there, it can overlap into potentially at least two wards. So New Normanton, what's the logic behind that? Why this footprint? And is it literally investment there, but not investment in the grey area, even though it is still Normanton or Arboretum? So just some logic behind that, really, in the explanation.
So the geographies have been set by MHCLG. They're based on what's known as medium super output areas. So population sizes of about 7 to 15,000 people. The medium super output area and the name New Normanton has existed for that medium super output area for a long time, I believe. In terms of how it's selected, that's been based on MHCLG data sets that they've used. In terms of how this area relates to the neighbourhood boards, there is a very clear expectation that we set up a board to support this programme and that particular geography. There is also an expectation that the new board works with and supports and integrates with any of the existing board structures or groups that are in that geography. At the point at which, so August 2026, there is an expectation that we submit the board itself, but there is also the opportunity at that point to request a boundary change that can be put into MHCLG, and that is based on the chair, the MP and the board and the local authority making that representation.
When you say boundary change, you mean the funding boundary?
The boundary that is within that medium super output area. There's some recognition that there may be specific geographies that would be recognised as part of that, but not present in that. So there is an opportunity to change it. However, they also are really clear in this second phase of funding that the population sizes aren't increased too significantly.
I suppose trying to just, and this is completely valid points, I suppose my interpretation of this is you have to have a defined investment area. It has to finish somewhere in a technical sense. But I would assume that the outlying areas that would still benefit from this investment from this defined area here. So I suppose my concern would be consultation needs to be wider than this very specific footprint. So is that designed into this process to ensure that those residents and the councillors, for example, even the MPs that represent the outlying areas, which are still relevant, are going to be part of this? You know, is that more or less what we're asking for here? Is there needs to be that assumption that there just isn't literally a cut-off where, well, you're not part of this, so you can't have your say.
So we are at that point at the moment, Chair, where we are seeking approval to accept the funding and establish the board. And then once the board is established, the work will then be ongoing to build the consultation and recognise the geography that we're talking about here, the places and spaces that the residents of those communities will use as part of their day-to-day life and the values of those, because people don't necessarily work to the boundaries that we impose upon them. And therefore a recognition of that will need to be part of the process moving forward.
I mean, and again, if you look at this map, you can just about see it in the grey area. We have Rose Hill, which is to the east, and we have Arboretum Primary School, which is right on the cusp of one of these lines. So, you know, the assumption, well, it needs to be that would be included, not necessarily in direct investment, if that's the way it has to work. However, there should be consultation in Rose Hill, as an example. There should be consultation and involvement in a local school, which just falls outside of what we can see here, because they are part of that the wider picture. So I suppose that's the assurance we're seeking here, is that there will be a reasonable wider consultation to ensure that everybody benefits in this area, rather than the new Normanton that we see here on a footprint which does not represent what we understand to be an electoral area or a polling district or anything that we can kind of recognise. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the officer trying to deliver this report. I'm a bit boggled by it all, I'm sorry. New Normanton isn't an area that we recognise. Looking at the map we've got, and it looks like a deformed helicopter from my vision, with a bit of a dog leg at the top, which actually is Abbey Ward. And then we've got Arboretum Ward, and then I think this is Normanton Ward at the lower end of this helicopter. So we've got 3 wards here, and I'm finding this very complicated. Perhaps it's just me without a glass of wine yet, but anyway. So it's all Derby South.
Yes.
Right.
Derby North.
Abbey Ward.
No, not all of it. Not all of it, no.
Sorry, have I invited a discussion or what?
No, sorry.
No, that's fine.
No, it's...
So I recall we had a similar discussion, Chair, you'll remember when we dealt with Chaddesden West a few months ago, when I appreciate the delicate situation of this, but my mind goes back to Derwent, the then Derwent ward, when we had the issue there where the issues with money, it wasn't properly scrutinised, there was no accountability, and we got in a little bit of a mess, didn't we? I'm sure some of us will remember that. My other point is, well, firstly, what we're going to do to scrutinise and to make sure the finances are dealt with in a professional way. My other point is that the name New Normanton means nothing to anyone here. And I also need to ensure that not only one ward councillor is involved, we need to have all the ward councillors. I think Councillor John Wright mentioned this when we were dealing with it a few months ago for Chaddesden West. All councillors are democratically elected to represent the people, and I think there should be room for all councillors to be involved in some way, because they are there to represent the community. So I'm a little bit perturbed that it's only one councillor. And looking at the map, the constipated helicopter we've got, there are obviously 3 wards here. So how are you going to choose one out of 9? I'm just totally baffled by it. And also, and I think most importantly, we need some framework for members of the public to be involved. Because if you think of the diverse community that we have got in this map, and also Southgate Retail Park, there's a lot of workers there, and that's quite highly, well, it's all very high density housing.
Densely, yes,
And we've got various schools, St Joseph's,
St Chad's,
Hardwick. I think it's going to be a big programme, and whilst obviously we welcome the funding, but we need to make sure it is properly constituted, the members of the public are invited and all the councillors, and the map, well, I don't know, I think I need a glass of wine to get through it all, but anyway, there we are.
Councillor Amin.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I was going to agree with what Councillor Bolton has said here, because majority of this area is Arboretum Ward. So you rather have, if not all councillors, one of each councillors from Normanton, Arboretum and Abbey as well in there to discuss how they want to spend this money on their communities. So that's the way I see here, that either all 3 councillors from each ward should be representing the board, if not, then one each then.
Okay, Councillor Wright, and I think Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I just want to say 2 things. One, to support Councillor Bolton's input, which I totally support, and the points are very well made, both on council and local representation and scrutiny, value for money issues. Councillor Bolton probably remembers the actual development of those programmes, but we're living with the legacy now of some of the decisions made. Residents in Chaddesden still quote some of those mistakes that were made then. And my second point is that this area does include the top of Normanton Road, which is a crime and antisocial behaviour hotspot. And although one of the objectives does talk about building stronger communities, I would have thought this is an ideal opportunity for the City Council in collaboration with the police to actually take some real long-term preventative and designing out crime around that area as part of this allocation of funding.
Okay, Councillor Kerr.
This is a strange one, isn't it, really? I think people have made some really useful points, but it's at the end of the day, the government's decided to do something and then dropped it in with a lot of detail, apparently, which doesn't seem to match with what we are thinking as local residents, local to Derby, even if not local to this particular patch. I was going to ask for clarification in 4.7, which talking about revenue capacity funding of 150,000. Is that per annum or in total? Because I think that makes a lot of difference. And I was also surprised to hear that the applications to be chair of the board have closed when it's only just not got to cabinet. And that, in terms of process, that seems really strange. I wonder who set the timetable.
To take the 4.7 point, so the 150,000 has been released and is with the City Council now to support will be to support the chair to do some of the public engagement that has been talked about here. In terms of the appointment of the chair, the timelines have been set by MHCLG, so there is an expectation that we work with the MP to work at pace to get everything in place so that we can do the meaningful engagement.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull this together because I think there's a recommendation here, isn't there? We welcome the investment, but we certainly, as a board, have concerns over this very new defined area called New Normanton, which doesn't have an elected representative, or I mean it does, but not in the sense of that's a defined electoral district or ward. And I suppose the concerns that we have, I think collectively, is that consultation involves those that this area overlaps, whether it be a small section or partly or whatever, and moving forward, the investment benefits those areas rather than just defined within the boundary of this New Normanton area, because it's alien to us to have an area which doesn't match a ward boundary. It's very strange. So it's probably this is one of those reports that's stumped us somewhat because it's not logical. So I don't know. I'm trying to think what a sensible recommendation would be. I think it needs further scrutiny. I'm not saying that we disagree with the funding or want to mess with that clearly, but the governance and who benefits from this, we need everybody that knows this area and is elected to represent the community and residents in these areas has their say. So I suppose that's the assurance, and then it would really be over to those councillors to actually ensure that those communities are represented. So I don't know if you could give us some assurances on that.
There is absolute expectation. The guidance talks all the way through about deep and meaningful engagement with everybody before the investment plan that will be drawn up for or submitted in January 27 is submitted. So there is an absolute expectation that consultation takes place. In terms of the governance arrangements, one of the things that internally we're working on now is ensuring that we, as the accountable body, taking the lessons from the past, that we do all the due diligence relevant to ensure that there is governance in place to support the success of what comes on the back of the investment plan. So the engagement will absolutely take place, and one of the things that we're really mindful on and working on with the MP at this point in time is ensuring that those governance arrangements are in place.
Okay. Would board, and whether you can strengthen this or offer me sort of guidance on it, but I suppose a recommendation, if I put this forward, would be we're seeking assurance that the consultation, maybe consultation is the wrong word, will involve the councillors of the wider area / the wards that New Normanton footprint overlaps or borders. I'm trying to ensure that there's discussion with all the with all the councillors in that area. So consultation, though, that's a word which, can it be strengthened? Engagement or involvement?
Involvement, yeah. Yeah, I think you ought to preface it by saying, Chair, sorry, that we welcome this funding. There's no doubt about it. And it's a pity it's not the whole of Arboretum Ward, but that, you know, that's a caveat. So we do welcome this funding by all means, but I think integral to it is that we get the involvement of the relevant partners, stakeholders, whatever you wish to term this.
Okay, so let's just change that then. So whilst we welcome the funding,
as your welcome statement, could we also welcome the ability to flex the boundaries?
I think we need to keep it simple. We need to keep it simple.
Because
what would the point of that then? What's your concern?
I think that Neil told us that it was possible to amend the boundaries of this area. And some of the boundaries of this area are really, really weird. So I think we should welcome the ability to alter the boundaries and for that to be one of the things to be discussed with local members.
I understand it now and I totally agree. Yes, okay. Can we go to the officer first, actually? Have you got any clarification on points? Sorry, Councillor Bonser.
Thank you, Chair. So I think, as Neil's articulated, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, you know, this report is to accept the funding. So that's the first thing, and this is a good thing for Derby bringing that funding in. The reason that we've gone out for the chair, for the board, is because we need to get this process moving, and we need to get that board in place with the MP and the chair of the board, so that we can look at the area. So there's nothing can be done about renaming the area. There's nothing that can be done about changing the boundaries of the area until we've got that board in place. And I think that's the key thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, just before, sorry, Councillor Bonser, I did stop you there. You can go ahead.
Could I just suggest in 4.6 that if we suggested that at least one ward councillor from each ward, that would solve the problem?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do a little rewording on that one.
On 4.6.
4.6.
Yeah, Councillor Bonser's asked the same question I was going to make a recommendation for.
Okay. Councillor Bolton?
Sorry, Chair, to ask to be involved again, but 4.9, it mentions the chair of the board. When is he or she going to be confirmed or interviewed, and who is going to be interviewing all the candidates? How many are there?
So there is a provisional date set for the interview at the start of June. With regard to inviting people to the interview process, in Chaddeston West we did a two-layer process where there was a community interview that involved all those community partners that we want to engage from the start, in a community interview where there's an activity that the potential candidates took part in, and then there was a more formal interview following on from that. So that's the process for appointing the chair. So what members are involved? The invites will be going out to the ward members across the 3 wards. To be on the interview panel? To be part of the community interview process. In terms of the interview panel, there will need to be a selection made about the number of people that are on that interview panel, but we try to do it so we get as many people involved as possible, and those ward councillors will absolutely be part of that.
Okay, so let's just try and pull this together then. So if we're looking at a slight addition of wording to 4.6, we're asking for a slight change. So the involvement of a councillor for each ward, I suppose, related to the footprint of New Normanton. I mean, hopefully that captures it. No? Well, I think that was Councillor Bonser, you were trying to say that it should be from each ward rather than a councillor. Yeah. Yeah. So, but each ward. It's, yeah. related to the footprint. So in other words, boundary or overlapping. Okay. So I'll word that up. And then, Councillor Wright, was it you that had another wording change on another paragraph, or was it somebody else, or was it all related? That was it. And then
was Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Kerr.
About welcoming the
yes,
ability.
okay, I've got that. So, whilst we welcome the funding and the ability to alter the boundary of New Normanton, we need assurances that there will be involvement with the councillors of the wider area / wards that New Normanton footprint overlaps or borders. Kind of keys into 4.6. Do you think that's needed, or do you think 4.6 actually covers that? Should be included. Okay, it's a little bit clumsy in the wording, but I think if we can agree with me tidying that up, if there are any additions, I can certainly, yeah. Councillor Cecile Wright.
Yeah, I know this isn't the place to work out the minutiae, but did you, the chair of this board that will be configured, will it be an elected person?
No, independent.
Which is what the interview process, Councillor Bolton's was concerned about, that it's very advanced.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the wording change on 4.6 is discussed, and then a slightly better wording in terms of welcoming the funding and the ability to alter the boundary, welcoming that too, and then assurance from this board that there will be involvement in the councillors that of the wider area / related to the footprint of this New Normanton area we're all learning about. Okay, so if I put that forward, do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Bolton, and we're all in favour. Okay, what I'll do is I'll tidy that up and I'll ensure that everybody sees that, but I think we've agreed with the general direction. Any more queries, questions, comments? No? Well, thank you very much. Okay. Oh, sorry, Karen.
Chair, have we received the recommendation for the end-to-end family hubs?
Okay. Yeah. Councillor Kerr, I did forget. There we go, I'll go back to it. Press your button. Councillor Kerr, press the button.
Sorry, ask that Cabinet seek to encourage our fostering hub to develop working relationships with neighbouring hubs from September to reduce competition within public sector foster career recruitment.
And I'm happy to second that. Are we all agreed that we can put that through as a recommendation? But, okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Kerr. That's been emailed through already?
That's gone.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 12 then, which is EMCCA investment regeneration and economic growth.
Thank you,
Catherine.
Chair. And I will say EMCA.
It's got
much
two M's,
quicker.
it's two C's, it threw me there.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. This report will give Cabinet a current update on EMCA's structures, governance and the funding available to deliver on its various strategic priorities. And within the report, it also explains how, for Derby City, we're proposing we develop an investment pipeline of priority schemes to help both Derby City to maximise investment and also EMCA deliver their strategies. So the first, I'll just summarise the key elements of the report because there is quite a lot of information in here. So sections 4.1 to 4.6 explain how EMCA is set up, the governance arrangements and the broad funding streams available to EMCA. Section 4.7 lists the investment that's already been committed or allocated to projects within Derby City. And apologies, I should have highlighted at the beginning, should be obvious, but this is specifically about regeneration and economic growth. Obviously, there have been previous reports on transport, for example, and there's other funding streams on skills. So section 4.8 to 4.11 is important, but because it explains how rather than a series of competitive bidding rounds, as we've seen in the past for funding, EMCA is now proposing to move towards thematic and place-based commissioning through agreeing programmes with local areas, which is a really important and positive change. In section 4.12, we outline the proposed key areas for focus of Derby's pipeline, with the headline priorities being city centre regeneration, the investment zone that's designated at Infinity Park, economic growth, which is around business support in the broadest sense, culture and the visitor economy, and we also reference connectivity and infrastructure, recognising the links to other services within the council. So we're proposing that under existing delegations, we can initiate conversations with EMCA about our priority schemes. And there are two specific recommendations around the funding. The first is that we're seeking delegated authority to accept and spend feasibility funding from EMCA. And this is really important because much of EMCA's funding is capital, and we need the resource to be able to develop well thought out and robust capital schemes, and this funding will help us to do that. We've said up to 250, and we're hopeful that that will be broadly an annual allocation. And then the second delegated authority is around submitting what EMCA call concept initiation documents for specific projects. And these are basically expressions of interest that allow EMCA to consider a project and allocate funding and put it on the pipeline. It's important to note that there will be opportunities for scrutiny of projects as they're brought forward individually for cabinet approval. That's key to note. And then as an example of the kind of approach that we're talking about in the report, there's a specific section on Beckett Well, because we have had a concept initiation document approved and a full business case approved for enabling works on Duckworth Square. And this will be really useful to help bring that site forward for a proposed office site. And there's a proposed grant of £2 million to helping those enabling works. And there's therefore some further delegated authorities to progress that project, with full details on cost, risk and indicative programme included in the report as well. So I'll leave my summary there and obviously happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Couple top of my head. So we talked about overview and scrutiny. So, I mean, I'm not directly involved in any of the various boards and committees or whatever you want to call them at EMCA. So I'm at a slight disadvantage, but you've said that it will travel through the cabinet process, so we will have sight of it. Will there be, is there an assurance there that it will also go through the relevant, well, most of the time it's the Regen, Climate Change and Regen Board. Will it, in good time, go through that mechanism so that those councillors on that board can scrutinise these proposals?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, yes, we've already been to the Regeneration and Housing Scrutiny Board with a similar earlier report that was a version of this, explaining the approach, explaining the proposed key themes that we were wanting to focus on for Derby. So we will absolutely continue with that. It's worth noting the pipeline is going to evolve, so we'll have to bring that back on a regular basis because projects will arrive, be delivered, and then we'll want to bring forward new ideas, so it will constantly evolve. And then in terms of the executive scrutiny and cabinet process, that will be for individual projects once we've got a level of comfort that EMCA are happy to fund it, and we will require cabinet approval and the associated scrutiny to take a full business case forward to EMCA. So we're hoping we get the timing right, so we've got enough certainty about the funding, but we leave enough time and space for scrutiny and cabinet consideration. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I mean, it's welcome that the Duckworth Square area is going to be regenerated and some viable plans in place there, as is a lot of the other potential pipeline. But at 4.2, one, you know, you can't really argue with most of EMCA's ambitions, but the number one priority is growing the economy, talking about bringing new investments in, which is covered. It's the helping businesses that I struggle with. I mean, I was walking around the town centre, marketplace and Sadlergate this morning, lots of empty shops, even the shops that are open and trading, a lot of them not trading on a Monday at all, Market Hall not open, and talking to business owners, it's like a never-ending circle of downward, things are getting tougher and tougher, both from a commercial perspective in terms of footfall and sales, but also lack of, and businesses have said, feel a lack of support from the council. And I'm not saying that the council's going to put everything in place to help, but there are some real things the council could do to support businesses, to actually encourage them to invest, to open longer hours. But there doesn't seem to be, I understand the capital bit, and that's really important, but the bit of helping business in terms of day-to-day costs is really helpful. And it's probably not for this specific report, but I do think that when you have your consultations with MCA, that really ought to be raised. I mean, they've only got to come to Derby and walk around on a Monday or most days of the week, apart from towards the week, the weekend when places like the market halls open and other traders are open. But people aren't coming into Derby because the shops aren't open. It's a depressing downward circle. And I'm sure if you get feedback from the business improvement districts, but they're feeding this back constantly as well about the need to do something. I recognise as well, and they recognise it's not just a Derby issue, but obviously that's this is our remit.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So a couple of thoughts on that. The first one in terms of specifically city centre, because I think that's the main thrust of your comments and questions. Obviously, within this report, we've set out a number of ways in which we want to support city centre regeneration. And the idea is if you create the right balance of places for people to live, work and spend time, then the knock-on benefits for the shops and the leisure and the hospitality businesses will come, because it's all about footfall. It's all about creating reasons for people to be in the city centre and ensuring that then the secondary spend can spill out. And coming back to Duckwood Square, that's exactly why we have an ambition for office accommodation in the city centre. Not just one, we would like multiple office developments, because having people working in the city centre and spending time here on their lunch break and after work is a really important ingredient to that city centre regeneration piece. So I suppose that's the first thought, that city centre regeneration priority is about those developments that will create the footfall and have more people living, working and spending time. And then in terms of the specific support for business, I think it was the third objective around economic development and supporting business. There's a whole piece of work at the moment where MCA are looking at what can be delivered regionally, so what advice, funding and support can be available for businesses on a regional basis so everybody can access the same. And then what can we create specifically for local areas that speak to local needs? So, for example, the obvious one at MCA level is rural businesses obviously have very different needs to businesses in an urban area. So how can that be reflected? So there's that separate work stream happening at the moment to look at what business support can be provided for individual companies. Thanks.
Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Rawson.
I think this is really interesting because you've described as what we're moving towards is sort of a programme of evolving work, which I really approve that we ought to have a work stream rather than bidding. And it still feels to me as if there's a bidding process that says, here's an idea, what do you think of it, Mayor? And it comes back and says, oh, well, I don't quite like that one, but could you do something more on this? And it's a sort of slightly different bidding process, but an earlier stage, so therefore we haven't done as much investment to get to the point of request. So I'd just like you to comment on that and see if you think that is reasonable. I'm really pleased to see that housing is in this list. I don't quite see how the housing in this list is going to work with the housing bids that we've already talked about this evening and the bids for the social housing, and how those two funding streams, whether they work together or whether they don't work together, and how that might happen. We're trying to reduce people's need for travel, and therefore, although it means that we might have less footfall in the city centre, we should be strengthening our district centres so that there are more things that you can do without having to travel very often 2 miles to the city centre and back again from suburbs. And as the suburbs get further from the city centre, I think that becomes more important. So to know whether or not there is the scope for putting funding into district centres and neighbourhood centres, I think would be useful as well. There's a comment, and we haven't got enough paragraph numbers here, 4.12.2, second paragraph, where we're talking about boosting productivity, which generally means achieving the same thing with fewer people, and creating thousands of high-quality jobs. And it seems to be a slight tension between saying we're going to be more efficient and therefore shed jobs and create more jobs. And if we are creating more jobs, then the housing is going to be really important, because unless we are doing enough in terms of upskilling and providing experience to people, that's going to mean people coming from elsewhere to come and live in Derby, which will mean more housing, or else our housing prices and costs will go up, which will make us even less affordable than we already are to a number of people. And that is a bit of a challenge, and that's one reason why it's so important that we look at the housing funding as well as the economic development funding. And finally, in a specific question, which I'm really pleased to see this mentioned further down in that paragraph 2, the last paragraph before it becomes 3, economic growth. Infrastructure investment, including power supply upgrades, and it specifically mentions the Derby South Growth Zone and Infinity Park. We've currently got the next level of consultation going on for the major national grid investment between Chesterfield and Willington. And that is going to sweep past the south of Derby, going quite close to Infinity Park. So are we looking for a side connection or similar from that Chesterfield to Willington link, so that the power doesn't have to flow into Willington and back again? And I think we should have something similar for Spondon and for the power use that we've got coming in on the east of Derby, with the smart park as well. And I don't know whether that's included. Their consultation didn't seem to be very clear on that.
Okay, let me have a go with all of that. Lucy, please say if I miss any. So firstly, on bidding process, you are right. There is still a degree of bidding in the sense that MCA have an assurance process. So we have to submit information for them to check and ensure that what we're proposing meets all of their criteria. However, the difference here is that we're in ongoing conversations with MCA through the various groups and through our relationships with officers there about the projects and the investments that we're suggesting. So when things land with them, it won't be a surprise. We will have already trailed those ideas, so we're not going in cold with something they're not aware of. On the housing point and the reference to the earlier report on this agenda, I think we can take that one away, and I'll talk to Karen about that and understand the potential linkages. District, not just city centres, was your next point. Currently, we haven't got district centres as a priority in the pipeline. I think there was a lot of discussion, and Verna may help with this, a lot of discussion at the last Cabinet about the potential investment programme for transport and mobility and how that might support communities across Derby, not just the city centre. But in terms of regeneration and economic growth, we don't currently have capacity or a programme for district centre improvements. That's not to say, however, that to Councillor Wright's earlier point, business support is accessible across the whole geography. Productivity, I don't necessarily see that in quite the same way, Councillor Kerr, because I see productivity as producing more, not just producing things more efficiently. So I don't think it's a productivity equals less jobs. I would hope it equals more jobs. And then totally agree, housing is critical, so we don't have a net import of workforce. housing is important, but also the inclusive growth agenda. So making sure the people who already live in Derby have the skills and the pathways to access the new jobs that are going to be created. And then the final point on power supply, I will take this one away and check, but I understand that because of EMCA's regional perspective and their role in building relationships with the utility companies, there is conversations with National Grid about that, but I will double check. And obviously the whole sustainability consideration around that as well is really important. At Smart Park, for example, they have their heating and cooling system now that has and have almost kind of, not completely, but are very self-sufficient in terms of their power creation and use on the site. So we'd like to do what we can to learn from that. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not as gloomy as Councillor Wright, although I do accept that over the last 10 years or so, town and city centres across the country have been in a downward spiral and really struggling for many reasons. But I'm optimistic. I think that we're actually breaking that cycle now with some of the projects that we've got listed in this report. And we can see really significant investment coming in via the East Midlands Mayor and EMCA. So that's really having a positive impact, I think, in terms of improving the street scene and bringing the footfall, which Catherine's described. Really, that's the key. Bringing more housing, so more people living in the city centre to support the local businesses. The Beckettwell developments obviously contributed a big part to that with the first phase with the Condor building. The Valent Live venue has then delivered another significant driver of footfall, particularly in the evening economy, and we're really hopeful that the next phase, the office development, of which the funding is described in this report, and how that's going to move forward, hopefully with the GBR HQ and the rail campus sort of anchored there, so that these things combined will really drive numbers of people in the city centre and the footfall and the spend, as Catherine said. But what's important is that we keep going, and this is where the pipeline comes in. So we don't rest on our laurels. We've got lots of projects coming to fruition, but we need to be thinking what's next, and making sure that Derby's got telling a good story, and making sure that we've got our making our case at EMCA to make sure that we continue to receive that funding going forward. So I do welcome this report in terms of putting in place what we need to make sure that as a city council we've got the resource there going forward to make sure that we can keep bidding into the regeneration part. Yeah, I'd just like to welcome the report, really, Chair, and just highlight again the importance of making sure that we've got enough resource within the City Council to keep working on that pipeline and driving a regen forward.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Catherine.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something, just so all members are really clear about the Duckwood Square proposal. So the £2 million grant outlined in this report is about site preparation. So it's about dealing with the site abnormals that still exist. There's some old structures, the retaining wall, getting the site ready to build the office. What it's not about is getting cabinet approval to build the office and bring that forward. That will be subject to ongoing work at the moment, and we'll be coming back to cabinet later in the year on that. Thanks.
you. Councillor Wright, if you can be brief.
Yeah, can I just clarify before I potentially make a recommendation? I know your point about MCA's got to look after all communities, but obviously as a city councillor, I'm interested in the regeneration of the city. Are you saying that those MCA in liaison with yourself have actually got plans for supporting businesses, or is it something that I certainly feel that if those conversations are not taking place, or if they are taking place but not yielding any significant support for businesses in Derby and Nottingham, for example, as well, then I would ask this committee to actually make a recommendation to Cabinet that they actually engage in those conversations. But if those are taking place and you feel confident they are going to yield some real potential help for local businesses, then I won't.
Yes, I'll answer that. Yes, there is, well, it's the Local Growth Fund, is specifically the fund that MCA's currently looking at how that's best deployed to support businesses. So what I tried to describe earlier was the fact that there will be services that MCA coordinate and provide regionally that are the same across the patch, regardless of where you live, because with previous funding streams and previous arrangements, it's been a bit of a patchwork. Where you live depends on, where your business is located determines what support you can access. So there will be regional level support, and indeed there's national support as well from central departments around advice and access to information. And then the next layer down is working through, which again we're doing at the moment, specific projects to meet specific local needs. So offline, Councillor Wright, I can give you some more information about all of that.
Councillor Wright, you said you may have a recommendation.
No, the question's been answered, thank you.
Good stuff. Okay. Okay. One final query or question. LGR impact. In terms of MCA-funded projects, is there any idea of how that may be transferred over to the new local authority? Is there any, or are we just going to have to wait and see and then come up with a framework?
I think I guess at this stage, Chair, I would say that's work in progress. I think the basic assumption is that any contractual arrangements associated with any of the projects would be novated to the new authority as a basic principle. But beyond that, I can't really comment any further at this stage. Thanks.
I mean, it is a concern, and obviously as things progress, once we get the decision from government, this and many other things we'll discuss, won't there, in terms of frameworks and how we're going to deal with that. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on. Item 13 then, which is disposal of land off Prince Charles Avenue, Mackworth in Derby.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks to declare surplus and subsequently dispose of part of land to the north of Prince Charles Avenue, opposite Mackworth District Centre, for the very specific purpose of developing a new healthcare facility to replace existing primary care provision in the locality. We were approached recently by Derby and Derbyshire Integrated Care Board expressing an interest in purchasing council-owned land within the Mackworth ward. This followed on from a number of years of feasibility studies, strategic outline cases which have been built by the Clinical Commissioning Group prior to the Integrated Care Board. It identified an inability of the current healthcare estate in the area to fulfil the needs of the growing population and established a number of options to fulfil that future need. The strategic online case by external agents refined those options into a preferred way forward. All the GP practices within the Mackworth ward were found to be at capacity and had to close their practices to new patients. This, in combination with the estimated increases in patient list size due to new housing developments in the area and the expansion in the role of the primary care estate, resulted in the following conclusions. That the adaptation of the existing surgeries alone would not meet increased patient demand. A new healthcare building was therefore required. And the preferred option will be to develop a new facility on Derby City Council's own space to the north of Prince Charles Avenue in Mackworth District Centre to replace one or more of the existing healthcare facilities. The proposed development is intended to comprise a new purpose-built facility with parking area, public realm improvements and open space enhancement are also proposed to the retained areas of the open space. Should we obtain permission at Cabinet, then the next stage of the process would be consultation as part of the Local Government Act process for the disposal of open space land. The expansion of the design of the facility by the Integrated Care Board alongside their local healthcare provider, and subsequently what I suspect will be a robust planning process. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm a councillor in Mickleover Ward, so I do understand Mackworth's situation, the same as the situation in Mickleover as well, where we do have a third GP surgery being built on South Derby estate, which is bordering Mickleover. So that's something which is obviously to be welcomed. And the discussions, the wider discussions about the area have included Mackworth. Obviously no direct involvement myself, and I know that the ward councillors in that ward with the ICB and officers obviously well engaged in terms of provision for that area. One of the, in 433 it says the preferred option would be to develop a new healthcare building, etc., on the open space, and it defines where it is, to replace one or more of the existing healthcare facilities in the area. Now, I'm not going to be stepping in any toes. I know that the local ward councillors will have this in hand, I'm sure, with the ICB. I'm slightly concerned with that wording, though. I assume that any replacement of existing will be, this new facility will provide far more than is currently there, because when you hear about potential closure, I know it's a replacement or closure of a current facility and replacement of new, it has to be not just like for like, it has to be significantly more than that to actually ensure that the provision, not just that is currently required, but is going to be required in the next decade, is going to be well serviced by this new facility. So just a slight concern over that wording.
Yes, thank you. In regards to that, I suspect at the end of the day it will be only one of the facilities which will be replaced, and the other units will be modified to help with their increased levels. But the new facility will be a significant expansion upon the existing facilities in the area, and is intended to cope with any expansion in patient need within the area.
Okay. And the other slight concern over that is to ensure that there would be full consideration of the locality, especially of the elderly, those with mobility issues, maybe areas with more acute health issues. That has to be considered as well, because Mackworth is a fairly large geographical area as well, so that needs to be in the mix. If this location is going to potentially replace some of the provision that is already there, we need to make sure that it doesn't adversely impact those maybe from one of the areas which is potentially going to lose that very local facility, but then have a replacement and some, but it's still quite a distance away. So that would be something where we would need to ensure that there's no one that's disadvantaged in terms of geographically for this new provision as well.
Yes, that will be certainly something that will be taken up within the consultation processes, which will follow on from actually obtaining the permission to declare surplus. And so those will be elements that will be discussed already on board with the ward councillors and also with the Director of Public Health as well, involved in those discussions.
And finally, timeframes. It's all well and good, a great announcement for local health provision. Any idea of when the doors will be opening on this significant enhancement to local medical centre GP provision?
Yes, sorry. I think it's very difficult to predict with these. I've been involved in a number of these previously in various locations like Sinfin and elsewhere where proposals have fallen through at a stage. I think this is a much more robust situation, that they have a partner healthcare provider on board and that this will be taken forward. It would hope that we could take this forward as speedily as I produce this report.
That would be a miracle, I think. It's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the things which is a challenge for the integrated care board is contracts. You can have a facility, you can have developer contributions, you can have the funding to actually build a facility, but it's the actual contracts to run the facility which can actually be quite difficult. So it's good to know that is something which you've just mentioned there as well.
Yes, it'll be something that I'll be involved with as the process goes along, alongside some of my other property colleagues within that.
Councillor Awesome.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very much to be welcomed. It's something that's been on the agenda for a long time and for whatever reason has struggled to be delivered. So it's really good to see it moving forward for residents in Mackworth. Just to sort of develop your point one step further, Chair, as well as the contracts, it's actually the having enough physical GPs who are trained and wanting to take on the post in a particular area. So, is there any work ongoing at this point to make sure that not only is there a contract in place, but in recruitment as well, in terms of being able to attract and make sure that we actually get GPs who are wanting to register at this facility.
And of course that leans on the ICB, so what's the feedback that you have on that particular issue?
So that is an ongoing process for the ICB at the moment, but I'm happy to address that with the ICB and bring it back to the councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
I'm sorry, I missed a little bit of the discussion, but I'm mindful of two things. One is that I'm really pleased that we seem to have a bit of strategic planning from the ICB about where we need to have improved GP facilities, and I hope that this is the first of a number of steps that might review where we have provision, particularly in the west of Derby, which I know better. But I also am mindful of when the council was looking for a site for the new library in Mackworth. There was a very strong reaction back from the community in Mackworth that they didn't want this bit of land used for a library, and therefore an alternative site had to be found. Is there an alternative being looked at if that is the reaction that we get this time?
At the moment, we haven't considered any other physical buildings. This is the way forward that the ICB wants to take at this present point in time. In terms of the library provision across the road from where this is intended to be provided, that would be too small in itself to take on a new facility of this kind. As we go through the Local Government Act process in terms of the sale of open land, all these matters will be brought to the fore, and we have to give due consideration to all those, and those will be discussed with the ICB and the health authorities as we go along.
And when we know Mackworth Ward is blessed with a lot of open green space in where it is, and obviously that's going to be fiercely protected. So I think it's a discussion down for the local ward councillors to have with residents and local stakeholders to actually work out whether they feel this plan is the way forward or whether there's alternatives. But that kind of falls outside of our remit, doesn't it, in terms of scrutiny? It's more of a local matter, I think. But the thing that you missed, Councillor Kerr, was you're absolutely right. I mentioned the fact that we do need the ICB to be moving a lot faster. This is very welcome. And the other one that in terms of the west of the city, Newhouse Farm, just the other side of Ladybank Road in Mickleover, the third GP, the much needed third GP surgery is being taken forward as well. So whilst they need to be moving a lot quicker, and we'd like them to have the contracts and everything in place a lot quicker, it is good to see this as the second in our area in terms of Mackworth, Littleover and Mickleover. That's 2 sites now that are being taken forward, which is very much needed considering how much housing we have. And Mackworth is the same as well, the north of Radbourne Lane. The impact is severe for Mackworth in my view, just the same as it is in Mickleover for the west and going to be the south of Mickleover as well in terms of housing provision.
Yes, just to reassure the councillor, over time we've built up quite a very close relationship with the ICB and have ongoing conversations with them about their needs going forward, and will continue to do so, even in addition to this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I support, it's really welcome that side of the city is getting its care. I'd hope we get the same on the east side of the city as well, because that's the same need. A small but important point, the War Memorial, is that going to, there's no issue around that being? No, okay, thank you.
And just to wrap it up, not to be negative, this is just a first few steps, because new local plans are proposing thousands of new houses, and we're going to need more provision moving forward in the next 10 to 15 years. So it's an ongoing conversation. This is just going to get us up to speed. In some cases, it isn't going to necessarily deal with the future provision that we're going to have to deal with in the next decade or a little bit more than that. So it's an ongoing conversation, and I'm sure somebody sitting in this seat and people in the future will be having the same debates and pushing the ICB to deliver much more, which we need to do. Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on then, which I think is item 14A, because we have 2, a 14A and a 14B, I believe. Who's going to introduce this one?
Hi, that's me, thank you. So this report seeks the approval and noting of the claim for and acceptance of approximately 2.4 million of Home Office grant funding for 2025-26. The funding relates to 3 schemes, being the Homes for Ukraine, which is up to 0.3 million, the Afghan Resettlement Programme, which is up to 0.4 million, and the Asylum Dispersal Grant, which is up to 1.7 million. With the Homes for Ukraine scheme, that allows Ukrainian nationals to come to the UK and stay with approved sponsors. The funding that's provided to local authorities allows us to provide support and integration projects and services, and also to reimburse monthly thank you payments that are paid to sponsors. The Afghan Permanent Resettlement Programme, up to 0.4 million, allows us to support Afghan households to integrate into British society, to become financially independent more quickly, and to access suitable accommodation and support services. Some of those support services include casework and integration support, assistance for those in transitional accommodation, housing support, and education provision for children aged 3 to 18. And then the Asylum Dispersal Grant, which is up to 1.7 million. So the Asylum Dispersal Grant is intended to alleviate pressures on local authority services associated with asylum dispersal arrangements. For example, the funding has been used to support public health services, specialist education support, housing support, and community integration projects. That's not exhaustive. The asylum dispersal is based on a dispersal model, which takes into account local population size, housing market pressures, and impacts on urban and rural communities. It also provides local authorities with greater autonomy at a regional level as well. So a key conclusion is that overall the grants received enable the local authority to reduce pressure on local services and to better support vulnerable individuals and families. There is no cost to the council, as eligible expenditure is reclaimable from central government.
Pause there, and then we'll discuss 14B after this one. So, Councillor Councillor Wright.
Yeah, my question is not against not taking the funding. It's really about transparency of how the funding is spent. When we had the debate at full council on asylum hotels, some information that wasn't generally known public about dispersal around communities was made public. I don't think that was the right forum for that sort of in-depth scrutiny. So my question really is not about the acceptance, but how we actually scrutinise how that money has been spent, and whether it's spent appropriately. I'm not sure that that takes place anywhere in terms of council. Obviously does at officer level, I assume, but how do we get that transparency so that we can be assured and residents can be assured that it's not leading to things like segregation of communities or undue tension, and critically enable us to feed back to our residents the impact of asylum communities in Derby?
We absolutely do provide to central government what we spend the grants on, but yeah, I take that point on that we don't necessarily share that very widely internally. We obviously do with our portfolio holders in terms of what spend goes through. That's something that we can definitely take away and have a look at, about being able to provide more information about what the grants are used for and what pressures they alleviate.
Yeah, I mean, a report or similar, you know, that would definitely be something. So what you're saying there is that the portfolio holder, the cabinet member in Derby City Council would be briefed, would have that oversight. Councillor Wright's quite rightly saying there that there needs to be a mechanism for that to be reported back to either the relevant overview and scrutiny board or council as a whole, so we can actually see that in a report somewhere. As an overview, that would be very useful if that can be done.
Absolutely. We could also provide some case studies and things as well that would make that a bit more, you know, real life as well.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. And it's good that the government recognises that this sort of support is needed and is actually providing some money to enable us to do that. My particular wanted to draw attention to 4.2.1. Which is looking to provide support for integration into British society and become self-sufficient more quickly. And I just think the learning that is gone through from that sort of provision that we're doing is probably relevant to a number of other people coming from other areas of the globe who might actually be able to afford to pay for that service. And I wondered whether we have the capacity to expand that service so that people who have come maybe as a partner or as a spouse to somebody who's already here would actually be able to do that, buy that as a paid service so that they can feel that they're integrating and can become part of British society more easily.
Lots of the integration projects are quite bespoke to small communities. I absolutely take on board the point that, you know, that would be a useful service. There are services available through the New Arrivals Alliance for the city as well, where they'd be able to access support and guidance through that service. And also we do try and provide, where we can, those integration opportunities. We also have a social cohesion coordinator now that has started in our team, and we very much do share that information really quite widely now across several networks. So although I don't think currently there is an opportunity for us to have a paid for service, I definitely think there are avenues for people to be able to access that support.
Okay, thank you. Can I just clarify, have we covered the 1.2, 1.3 and 1.4, which is the storage hub, the C2W and the Consolidated Active Travel Fund?
No, we're going to pick those up separately.
So if we're okay to move on to those, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm picking up the storage project and the Connect to Work funding. So in relation to this 1.2, the report is seeking approval to widen the scope of feasibility and design work for the Council's storage solution using existing approved funding of up to £969,000 with no request for additional money. In April 2025, Cabinet approved the purchase of land off Storage Road for a new highways hub, and in October 2025, approved up to 1.673 million for feasibility, design and pre-construction work for both the highways hub and a proposed new storage hub on Storage Road. The intention was to create modern, fit-for-purpose storage facilities for museums, collections, Derby Live equipment and wider council storage needs. However, early cost estimates showed that constructing a brand new storage building alone could exceed 9 million, excluding internal fit-out and racking. Given those costs, officers explored more affordable alternatives using existing council-owned buildings. Buildings at Markeaton Park Yard, the Old Central Library and Storage Road Depot have now been identified as potential storage locations. Whilst these sites would still require refurbishment, reconfiguration and condition improvements, the estimated costs are significantly lower than building a completely new facility. The report therefore asked Cabinet to approve widening the existing feasibility work so that detailed designs and delivery plans can now be developed across these alternative sites, as the wording of the original approval was narrow and applied only to Storage Road. This will also include some feasibility work linked to relocating current services, such as moving bin and ride-on vehicle storage, and potentially constructing a new salt barn adjacent to the new highways hub. Importantly, this proposal does not commit the Council to construction at this stage. The work will determine deliverability, costs, storage capacity and opportunities linked to local government reorganisation. Once completed, a full business case with all capital and revenue implications will be brought to Cabinet for final consideration and approval.
On that then, I would just say, is there any risk of abortive costs in this?
No, not at this point.
Okay. Councillor Rawson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, my one concern really is in terms of the Central Library, which is a beautiful building, and I know the Museums Trust had some plans potentially, again depending on funding for use of that in the future. Perhaps just a little bit of reassurance that the Museums Trust are involved in these discussions, and we're not going to potentially be losing such a what would be a great public-facing building, you know, just to fill it with items that, you know, could be perhaps stored somewhere more appropriate. So just sort of flagging that up really about the Central Library building, and to ask if the local studies library are also included in these plans, because I know they've got some storage needs outstanding.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. To reassure you, there are no plans to convert the Central Library fully to storage. We're simply looking at the basement. The Museums Trust has a lease of the ground floor upward of the Central Library building, and that would retain, but the basement continues to be under the occupation of the council. So we're looking at how we can use that space in the basement more effectively to provide storage, primarily for the museum's collection actually, which would be more efficient for them being on site. In terms of local studies library, we haven't identified additional storage requirements that are required by this specific project, but local studies library are currently having some alterations to their accommodation delivered through the work at Riverside Chambers as part of the redesign of that building to accommodate the coroner's service. Members of committee will recall that a report came to Cabinet on that project just recently.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Kerr.
I do recognise that £90 million is a big sum of money just to be thinking about sorry.
9 million.
9 million.
Yeah.
It's still a lot of money to be spending on buildings for storage, but I am conscious that the need for better storage has been identified, and we were hoping to definitely go up and have something that was more forward-looking and long-term and, you know, substantially better than the schemes we've got at the moment. And it makes me wonder whether there is, we've looked at alternative ways that we might be able to fund this, and whether there's other sources of funding that might be able to come in to supply us, to help supply a solution.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. What I would suggest is that this approach is a true asset rationalisation approach. So it's looking at our portfolio in the whole and identifying buildings which are currently actually underutilised and where they can be significantly improved to deliver fit-for-purpose, forward-looking storage solutions. So in terms of Markeaton Yard, there is significant excess space there which we can use. We would be looking to bring forward update the condition of those buildings, and then within those buildings create fit for purpose climate appropriate storage facilities within them. We'd also be looking at carbon reduction measures in relation to those buildings as well. There is good potential within those buildings for solar panels, for example, and other greener options for energy. So whilst we aren't able to deliver a brand new facility, what this will do is allow us to maximise the buildings that we do have, ensure that they are used to their optimum capacity, and deliver proper asset rationalisation across the estate where we retain those buildings which have the most potential and dispose of ones which are no longer fit for purpose, such as the existing Bold Lane store.
Councillor Kerr, briefly.
Can I just come back and say that is a really lovely answer, which is not included under climate implications, and it could have been. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Once the full business case comes forward with the Cabinet report, all the climate implications will be set out there.
There you are, praise indeed. Okay, thank you. We can move on then to 1.3.
Thank you, Chair. I'm picking this one up as well. So the proposal is to accept £1.5 million of Connect to Work and Supported Employment Qualification Fund funding from MCA, awarded directly to the City Council without a bidding process. The programme will be delivered by the Employment and Skills team within the Directorate for Learning, Inclusion and Skills, running from January 2026 to March 2030. The funding is designed to provide consistent, high-quality supported employment services for people with disabilities and health-related barriers to work, using a person-centred approach. The programme aims to support 234 participants with a target of 117 job starts. Around 85% of participants are expected to be economically inactive or unemployed, while 15% are currently in work but at risk of losing employment. The funding will particularly support people whose main barrier is disability, including learning disabilities, physical disabilities, autism and sensory impairments, alongside individuals needing more intensive support, such as refugees, homeless people, survivors of domestic abuse, ex-offenders, carers, veterans, care leavers, people recovering from substance dependency, and young people at risk of serious violence. Thank you.
Thank you. One question from me. It's good to see armed forces and reservists as well mentioned in that list. Can I just ask, does our department have the resources to deliver this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my understanding is that is the case, but I can take that away and get absolute confirmation from the service for you.
Because sometimes, obviously, funding is extremely welcome, but obviously council resources sometimes can struggle to actually cope with spending that money. So it's just a concern. I don't know the answer to that, but it's just something which can be looked into. If you can let me know, that'd be great. Thank you.
No problem, Chair.
Okay. Okay, we'll move on to 1.4, which is the acceptance of 352,000 active travel fund.
And that's me, Chair. This is acceptance. As you know, we've been here before with our capital report back in April, and you know that MCA receive our transport funding across the board. We were aware that there was some funding that was yet to be allocated, and this is a part of that, the Consolidated Active Travel Fund, so 352k, and the report recommends acceptance and then application of the 3 schemes set out in the report at 4.6.1 onto our capital programme. And unfortunately, it was allocated too late to be part of that MTFP or our annual plan. But it's for construction of Duffield Road and West Bank Control Crossing, the Uttoxeterol Road Parcel Terrace pedestrian crossing, and I suppose the last one is worth just noting. This is the development to detail design to provide a control crossing. So, you know, there is a slight risk that should that become abortive, then we would have to look for a revenue solution, because this is all capital funding, but I would see that as a low risk.
Can you just make sure that you deliver the 2 Mickleover crossings before? You know I was going to say that. Okay, thank you. Is anyone commenting on that? No? Okay. 14B.
Back to me again, Chair. So this hopefully is also relatively straightforward. So this is a report that's seeking approval to extend our existing highways maintenance framework just for a period of 6 months to allow us to undertake the procurement of a replacement framework. The current framework underpins delivery of many of our statutory highway maintenance activities and is an efficient and compliant way to deliver both revenue and capital funding, as set out in the appendix. You can see the different elements that the funding goes towards. Of course, over the last 12 to 18 months, there have been a number of emerging factors that have created uncertainty around the longer-term procurement arrangements, not least the arrival of MCA, LGR, etc. So the proposed short-term extension is really just a pragmatic, practical way that we can provide that operational continuity that we need, giving our officers sufficient time to undertake that future-proof procurement exercise. And as part of that new framework, you know, it presents us an opportunity to also consider other areas like social value, sustainability, etc., and strengthen those, and also bring in perhaps other areas that we might wish to as part of the procurement. So, so it really is a way we can deliver our highway work, continue to invest without disruption, is the lowest risk option that we would suggest to maintain that service, but also then continue the ongoing work to make sure we're in line for future changes of local government, the local government landscape, should I say.
I was just going to mention that, LGR, but again, it's something which we're all going to have to deal with as we move forward, as we hear from government, but it's all in Appendix 1. Does anyone have any specific queries? Councillor Kerr.
I was wondering what we're going to do if our current partners in these various areas don't wish to go forward with us.
Yeah, we've done some pre-consultation with the framework providers currently on the framework, and they have all indicated that they are willing to continue for the 6 months. So very positive, actually. Really enthusiastic, I would say, rather than just a casual yes, we will.
Okay. Any more questions, queries or comments? I don't think so. So thank you very much. It's been a long meeting. Thank you for officers. Thank you for members. And well, I don't know if I'm going to be chairing this at all, but thank you very much for your contributions over the last municipal year. I'm sure we've done a good job. I think we have. And hopefully it will continue with whoever chairs and whoever forms this board. Thank you very much.
Chair, can I say thank you, because I've appreciated your leadership and the more specific direction that you've been trying to take Scrutiny in.
Well, thank you very much.